when you're thinking about bridging the transformation work and that tangible value, there are a million different things you could go chase, but what are the things that really matter to your business? What does your business need right now? And then go match that up with the technology that's going to fit that solution.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have a transformation expert in Alex Sims, who's the VP of Transformation at Sleep Country. Welcome, Alex.
Yeah, thanks. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Alex, as you know, we always like to start off by learning a bit more about your career journey and how you ended up in your current role. So maybe walk us through.
Absolutely. So I started my career actually really differently. I started in performance psychology. So my interest was really about helping people understand how to be motivated or lead people to kind of define or surpass their definition of success. That's kind of my why I get up every morning. And that led me into transformation because there's so many businesses and leaders that are navigating the dilemma of these massive changes at rapid paces, most of the time rapid paces. And so that expertise parlayed really well into that environment. And then just with the way that digital has blown up, that became my world as well. So I've spent that last half decade basically working with retailers and global organizations on their B2B and B2C digital transformations, most of them including all the way through their technology stack. So replatforming the digital ecosystem, introducing a full IT automation setup, implementing DevSecOps, working on their cloud implementation. So kind of A to Z across the businesses. So that's been kind of my history. And now super honored to be working with Sleep Country. They've kind of always been at the leading edge for their industry in terms of customer experience, specifically in store. And now we want to bring that to the customers to wherever they are. And so my role is to kind of sit within the portfolio and manage across all of our different business components that are being impacted by the transformation work.
That's awesome. How do you look at defining success for a digital transformation initiative? Like when you're coming in, like how do you know kind of what the end goal is that you're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like success for a transformation has to be a hard growth number, whether it's the top line, the bottom, or both. At the end of the day, if someone's wanting to go down the path of transformation, like there's a very clear and obvious reason for it, and it is growth. I think under that, sits what are the processes that need to be put in place? And under that, what are the skills that need to be leveraged to do that in order to kind of operate under a new way of business? But at the end of the day, it is growth focused. I don't know if your question is specifically about like defining success or what are some of the ways you can tell that you're successful, because I can lean into that as well. But defining at the end of the day, I think is the growth number.
Makes sense. So you're defining, and then obviously to your point, how well you're tracking against that's likely going to be a good indication of how, if it was pulled off in a good way or not. So maybe talk to us a bit about, so obviously you have the technical digital transformations, and then you want to deliver tangible value. Like you mentioned, like spinning up DevSecOps and stuff like that. Like how do you connect all these different functions and jobs to be done from a transformation standpoint to the actual tangible business value? Talk to us a bit about that.
Sure. Well, I think that with growth being kind of the umbrella of like what most organizations are chasing, digital transformation is really how businesses are doing that these days. But within a digital transformation, you really can't get that growth or the value that's needed without a strategic investment in your technical elevation. So digital in particular, you see it every year at these big conferences. You've got a bunch of vendors that are coming to the table and talking about where they're at with their new technology that particular year. And I think especially right now with where the growth and accessibility of AI is, there's just so much accessible to businesses to leverage. It's almost overwhelming at this point. And so you have to have a strategy to stay relevant and competitive, but it needs to be specific to your business outcomes. And so when you're thinking about bridging the transformation work and that tangible value, there are a million different things you could go chase, but what are the things that really matter to your business? What does your business need right now? And then go match that up with the technology that's going to fit that solution. And I think that's somewhere that a lot of organizations actually struggle is before they even get started with the transformation. They haven't really sat down and thought through, okay, strategically, what is the direction that we want to go? And then let's go see what solutions are out there to help support us to get there. It's like we sent someone to this conference, they heard about this really cool thing. We don't want to be behind, so we should go put it in place. And I think that's a little bit backwards. So organizations are best set up before they even get started with understanding what exactly is the direction that we're actually going to try to go in, and then have the technology see where it can support it from there.
Love it. And obviously, as part of a digital transformation, like strategy and actual operation, you have to bring in different pieces of technology, have kind of success criteria for each. How do you, as a merchant, make sure that you're selecting the right software? Are you big on running POCs? Maybe talk to us a bit about that. Because like you mentioned, you can go to NRF or any of the other conferences and there's like 10,000 booths. Everyone wants to take you to dinner. If you bought every tool under the sun, you would 10x your sales because everyone increases your sales by whatever, 3x. So maybe talk to us a bit about that.
Right. And then there goes all my cost as well. So it's I don't actually get what I need. Yeah, I had a mentor that told me one time, if you really want to go to New Zealand, there's a couple different ways you can get there. You can take a car part of the way, then you can fly, and then you can get on a boat. No matter what you're really going to choose, you'll probably end up in New Zealand. But it doesn't really work the other way around. So like if I just go jump in any given boat, like it's not probable I'm going to end up where I actually wanted to. And so I think that as an organization, you've got to have at least that end goal in mind before you go into any of these decision-making or prioritization conversations. And that includes going to these conferences or meeting with vendors or going to the dinners, whatever it is. If I, as a key leader, am not clear on and bought into what our strategic vision, our strategic goals are, then I'm going to just go chase the new shiny thing. And I'm going to come back to you excited about it and then be frustrated when you tell me it's not a part of our plan. So getting that alignment with your key leaders up front, cascading that through the organization, then you've got all eyes and all ears on not just growth, but what growth means specific and uniquely to your organization. So it's great that there's this awesome tool over here. I don't really need to spend my time and investment there because I know it doesn't align with what our strategic goals are. So for me, that's the biggest wall that I run up against. Does this actually match up with my strategic goals or not? And if it doesn't, I'm not spending any time there.
Love it. So as companies go down the path of digital innovation and transformation, often their websites become multi-language, multi-brand, multi-region. Could you maybe talk us through some of the things that you've implemented to ensure that as these websites get more complex, user experience, stability, and things like that don't suffer?
Yeah, so I think companies that aren't focused on stability don't really have the luxury to talk about innovation. And Sleep Country's done a really good job of keeping the focus of quality for their customers and associates at the forefront of every decision that's made. And so the first part of our transformation was completely focused on that stability. We knew we couldn't get to that innovation component without having stabilized across our systems and our different experiences. While we were doing that, if I can say and kind of reference our previous conversation, is the stability of the strategy. How core and how focused is that across the entire organization where everybody knows what the beat of the drum is that we're marching to, so to speak. And so now we're at this place where we have stabilized and we've seen key metrics. Our customer file is growing, our written sales are growing year over year, our systems are up 99% of the time. That was not always the experience that was happening. Now it is. So we're in a healthy state of growth. That's how I think about stability. Are you in a healthy state of growth? We can dream and we can start to implement these innovative things, but it's not without kind of that North Star. We're all on the same page about what exactly we want to chase as an organization. So I think putting in those structures of, is there a clear view, a clear vision of the strategy? Has it cascaded throughout? Are all of our decisions running up against or based on that? And have we kind of taken care of our own house first? Have we taken care of what we've already committed to? Is it running as expected or better? And have we delivered against our original commitments before we go try to spin up a bunch of other stuff? That's been really key. And then I think the other thing really is your team. On the customer experience side, keeping that really smooth and seamless, especially amongst all the different things that you could do. It's really about having a team that can stay focused within that structure. So I've got this brilliant CX UX team, and they are staying completely at the forefront of not only our customer insights, but just the insights in our industry. And then we've got incredible dev and test teams that are ready to implement that at kind of any given notice. And so we've got our core priorities that we're chasing on a quarterly basis with these teams. But at the same time, customers want what they want when they want it. So as we get some feedback from them, we're able to intake that and pivot as we need to. Again, as long as it maps up to that original strategy that the organization is chasing. So when we talk about stability and seamless customer experience, you have to take care of your base first, but innovation can still be stable and seamless if you've got the right team focused on the right priorities.
Have you ever seen either firsthand or through proxy when kind of innovation goes too far and it's technology for the sake of technology, and then it becomes this large, cumbersome thing that actually starts working against the business? I think you talked through a couple different ways of how to avoid that, but I'm curious, have you ever seen that firsthand? What are kind of some of the telltale signs that an organization might be going through that?
I've seen it headed in that direction. I've never personally been in the boat where it ends up all the way in that space, because typically I'll try to raise my hand and be really loud if I see that, or any of the key leaders around me see something like that. But I think it really ends up where you do, if you're working inside of an organization that has silos and you're not even in the path to bring those things together, that's where you really see it. I worked with an organization where the head of IT and the marketing person had never even met each other. And this is like multi-billion-dollar organization, but that's how they've always operated. And they're winning in their space, but until they weren't. And so part of the work that I did was bringing these teams together, actually to just have a conversation. You'd be amazed at what can get done when people talk to each other. But part of what was a leading indicator in that particular space that, hey, we're chasing really cool technology over here, but it has nothing to do with what the business actually wants or needs, is like, you have people who aren't talking to each other. You haven't set space. You haven't dedicated time for them to actually have these really important, thoughtful conversations. That is, to me, the biggest indicator. You've just got these silos and nobody's even trying to bring people together, because in their world, they're doing the things that they're supposed to do and they're cool and they're going to help, but it's not in context of the rest of the world that they work in. So that's been the biggest challenge that I've tried to help make sure doesn't happen within the organizations I'm a part of.
No, it makes sense. And obviously, as we go through these large scale transformations, not everything is going to go on budget, on time, and have a successful outcome. How do you balance kind of pushing the boundaries and teetering on failure, and then knowing when to call in a project versus doubling down? Like, how do you balance those things? Like, basically, how do you know what's a winner to double down, and what do you know what's a loser to kind of cut your losses?
Fair question. I think that when you think about the success of a transformation, there's so much that goes into the front half. Like, a lot of the time, the implementation is hard and it has complexity, but it can be made easier by the upfront work that's done. And so a lot of times when we're kind of assessing the opportunity for something that we would want to go chase, you want to look at not just what is the ROI. Everyone's going to look at the ROI, or you're probably not going to get the investment you need to go do it. But why does the organization feel that is really important, that they need it right now? And then, do you have the right leaders in place to actually support that? So there's a metric out there that 4 or 5 of the big research companies have about the same stat, and it's basically 75% of transformations fail. And that's usually because of lack of active sponsorship and lack of focus on the actual people that have to go implement it. We say all the time, you can implement anything all day long as as people aren't involved, but they are. And so taking care of them is how companies actually get to be in that 25% of successful transformations. And I think a key part of that is when you're starting out and you're doing what we call our business hypothesis. So these initiatives that you're going to go chase inside of the digital transformation, what is the actual return that you expect, not just in terms of the investment, but what are you getting in terms of your customer side, your associate side, your operational efficiencies? Like, people should actually sit down, they should research the best practice benchmarks, they should leverage the history of the data inside their organization if they have access to it, and then put together an actual business hypothesis as well as the leading indicators. So at what point in the implementation are you going to stop and take stock of, are we on track for the success that we thought? Are we going to get the return that we had planned for? And those are kind of your parachute moments that I call, I got to pull the chute and I've got to pull up out of the weeds if we're not hitting our leading indicators. So for me, it's like, the data doesn't lie. Put the data on paper before you even start. Once you've decided that this is an actual initiative you should chase, put that data on paper and then hold your team accountable to, are we hitting these benchmarks as we go along or not? And then I think the last thing is, as just the leader driving a transformation, you have to decide what your threshold for failure is. Every transformation is going to have some of it. It's like kind of losing the battle to win the war. You're going to have some failures, but what is that threshold for you as a leader that your organization can actually afford to absorb in the process of the transformation, because man, is it hard and people lose morale. There's this change curve of where you go into what we call the pit of despair. And it's not a matter of if your people are going to hit the pit of despair, it's when and what are you going to do to get them out of it. So there's a part of that you just kind of have to account for and be okay with. But you do, as a leader, have to decide what is that threshold that I'm willing to sit in that pit of despair or allow my people to sit in it. And at some point, it's not worth the return that I'm going to get. And that's where you want to have these kind of benchmarks or these parachute moments to know when to chase after and when to make that hard decision if you have to. Hopefully, you don't have to.
As you're going through that, and obviously you launch a new platform, all of these things, now you're kind of, to your point, you're in baseline stability mode. Maybe talk to us. Have you ever implemented processes around continuous innovation versus investing in quality and stability? At the beginning, you launch, you clear up all the tech debt. That's great. As you evolve and add to a platform, more tech debt accrues. Talk to us a bit about your philosophy around balancing, call it new feature development versus investing in tech debt and things like that.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in this because I learned the hard way. So if anyone could learn from me, I'd be so happy to save them a little bit of pain. But I think what I've seen is a lot of organizations are having the right conversations in the wrong places or in the wrong order. And so you've got the business team wakes up on Monday and they have their flash sales meeting and they're covering how the business is performing. And then later in the week, you've got your development team who's talking about the bugs and the issues that are going on and how they're going to go fix it. And then later in the week, you've got your product team who's talking about the cool new things that they're doing and when they're going to get done. And so those are the right conversations to be had, but they're completely separated from each other and they're separated from the context of those overall goals that you set from the beginning. So something that we've done at Sleep Country is actually implemented, I'm calling it the business readout. It should be in context of the business, and it covers those three areas. So we start with how are we performing against plan? So like, how are the sales performing in our different categories, in our different areas? Not only how are we doing, but how are we doing against our forecasted plan? And then we go over our friction points, and we actually leverage Noibu for that. So we have a readout of our prioritized issues that we pulled out of Noibu, and the team has actually had to go in and already investigate them, understand what the work is to solve them, and bring to this conversation what are the top things that we're going to be chasing in this next release to address these friction points right now. And then if there are any other friction points that maybe we need to be aware of, but we're going to solve them a little bit later, like you need to put some context around that. And then the third thing in this discussion is how are we tracking against these quarterly innovation goals? So these new features, new functionality that we've planning to put out, we put on our roadmap, we promised it to the people in the sky, and we've got to deliver against them. And so we're having this conversation about how we're performing so that everyone's informed. You don't just have your key leaders that are feeling the weight of that, but everyone understands how we're performing and what they're doing is directly impacting that. We're addressing the friction points and we're addressing the innovation all in the same conversation, because it's not like you've got 5 new people over here that are going to show up and do it for you somewhere. You have those people you have the same amount of capacity. And so if you're not talking about all the things that those 5 people need to be doing in context of the goals that you set at the beginning, you're losing sight of that. So are your people. And then you've got fragmented resources chasing 30 different things, getting 10 of them done. And so you're not actually getting the productivity that you would have expected, nor are your people actually feeling the impact of the work that they're doing. So it's really important to see output. And we've been doing it since late Q4, early Q1. We've seen a ton of productivity increase since then, and so much more healthy conversation about the decisions that we're making. So it's been really powerful.
Love to hear it. I mean, I think it just makes a lot of sense. To your point, a lot of these businesses are siloed, and what's most important to the engineering team might not overlap with the business team and vice versa. Talk to me a bit about what's next for Sleep Country. Obviously, you folks just went through a pretty large digital transformation. Maybe it's not done yet. What's next in your own words?
Yeah, I don't want to give all of our secrets away, but I will say we have a organization-wide transformation that we're undergoing. Digital was just the start of it for us. And this year is all about innovating on top of that and really making ourselves accessible to our customers whenever and wherever they are. We kind of think of it as like everybody deserves a good night's sleep, and we want people to have access to our best-in-class products and our best-in-class sleep experts to really navigate them through that and making sure, because sleep is so personal to you. It's so unique. And so to be able to have someone partner alongside you whenever you're thinking about it or whenever you need it, if you're sitting in your bed at night and you're like, I'm just miserable and I wish I had someone to help me. We want to be able to bring access to our strengths and our great products to our customers in those moments and be that sleep expert and that partner for them. So a lot of our work this year is about that. And I think in terms of some of the cool things that I can say is we are, like several others in the industry, but hopefully differently, leveraging AI in our digital space, but also in our tech stack as we think about our privacy and security. So not only are we going to elevate the experience for our customers, but for our associates as well, and just for our systems to make sure we're really locked down and we can continue to provide that experience.
Well, thanks so much, Alex, for a great episode on digital transformation, and really appreciate you taking the time to hop on.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.